What's up, Zox fam? Now, I've made a massive discovery in Tribe 9, and not only is this going to change how you look at gear, but it's actually going to change how you go about crafting gear. Now, I have to shout out the homie Giselle for actually raising the question because it actually made me go and do a little bit of a deeper dive. Now, there's a few do's and don'ts that I'm going to be including in this because this is going to heavily affect the outcome of what you're going to be able to do. And there's still a couple of different things that I'll basically raise as questions that I'm still even testing and trying to figure out. And I'll let you guys know as we push forward. All right. So what exactly am I referring to? And I want to take us a step back and actually start at the initial thing that I'm referring to. Now, there's two things that are very clear that at this point in the game, we are farming tier 6 and tier 8 gear. But the thing that's really odd about it is, well, we don't really use or seem to want to use tier 6, but there's a value on tier 6 that only rolls on tier 6. Now, the thing that I'm referring to is actually the enhanced skills. So for example, when we're looking at this piece right here, this is the full speed ahead, and this is basically going to increase action level of full speed ahead by 1. Now, the thing is that these tier 6 pieces can roll a value for any character in the game, and it will be one of the 3 main skills that a character has. Their main or primary or secondary skill and or strategy skill or ultimate, right? So it'll be one of those abilities that you essentially can get a skill value roll on a tier 6 piece. Now, the thing that was asked was, well, is it possible to get a tier 8 to drop this? And no, it's actually not. Tier 8, which I have farmed tons of it, will never drop a substat for an enhanced skill. And this was something that was kind of alarming to me because I was like, well, this is kind of interesting. Why would they not have that value be included in tier 8 pieces? Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. I actually have a tier 8 piece, which you guys can see right here. Let me actually move myself so you guys can see this. I have a tier 8 piece with Luminous Amplifier Enhance, Shield Damage Reduction 4, and Grant Recovery Effect 2. And this is a tier 8 piece. Now, you might be wondering, well, Zox, how exactly did you get that if tier 8s don't naturally drop with an enhanced ability like that, right? We've been completely looking at the PAR system wrong. Now, I was under the impression that initially, and if we go back and let's go and read what the PAR system says, right? So let's actually back out real quick. And let's go and read what it says on the PAR. Now, this is, of course, going to be showing you guys what the PAR or what I'm referring to. It is this bad boy right here, okay? Now, it says on the PAR, it is effective until the 10th Pattymon is received. Has a chance to receive Pattymons with one of the substats that is the same as the current equipped Pattymons in Fractal Vice. And it says tier 8 Pattymons. Now, the thing about this is that I was under the impression, well, this would more than likely be taking stats primarily from the tier 8 Pattymon, right? Because we do get purple tier 8 Pattymon, but there really wasn't any real clarity there. So I decided to actually utilize one of my PARs on one of my gear pieces, and I'll show you specifically who I have it on, and I'm gonna explain why I did it this way in a second. But on my Q, I decided just for experiment purposes that I would actually equip him with with basically a piece of gear that is tier 6 for my Miyu that has Resonance Accelerator enhanced on it. Now, why did I do that one specifically? Because this one actually is giving me my ult drop. And this was something I decided to do after. I wasn't fortunate enough to get that roll, but the initial one that I did, which is actually this one, sorry, has the Luminous Amplifier Enhance. Now, there was something that I was able to identify, and this actually taught me 2 different things. That yes, you can technically use the PAR on a tier 6, and it will give you potentially a enhanced or a tier 8 with the replicated Luminous Amplifier Enhance or any other skill in the game enhanced. But there is a big thing that you want to be aware of when doing so. Now, one of the things that you might notice, so I did try or attempted to try to do this same process with this piece that had the Resonance Accelerator Enhance. It has the crit rate 1+, and the support 1. Now, I want to show you something you probably have not seen any of your pieces do, okay? And this is why I said that this was like a big discovery because it taught me a whole bunch, and I'm to basically saving you guys from making this mistake. Okay. Now, if we go back and let's go back to the exact same pieces here. Now, this might be one of the most indifferent and weird things. Most people probably didn't even know that this was even possible, but you can technically get a piece that looks just like this. Okay, so this has a support 1. Now remember, the piece I just showed you was had a support 1 on it with the resonance enhanced on it, right? And then it has crit damage multiplier 4+ and crit rate 3. And you're like, well, Zox, how did you get a gray stat? I thought you couldn't roll gray stats. Well, naturally, no, you can't. But if you use the par system on a piece with a gray substat, it will then be a chance that that gray substat will be shared to the first line. Now, the crazy thing is that this is not the only piece that I got like this. I know I have another one somewhere. I have to find it, but I have more than one piece, okay? And so that was basically a way for me to be able to test that. And what I also was able to identify, and I think that this is actually the third thing, is the par system specifically it inflates or affects, I should say, it affects the very first line on your substats. What I noticed is that the substat, the very first one, is the only stat value that's actually being influenced by the par system. The other thing that I also noticed is that only one stat will potentially be shared or will transfer over. So it is a chance that you more than likely will have one of those said stats be on a tier 8. So it can be one of the 3 stat values that you have on the piece of gear, or 2, whatever that tier 6 is that you're using. Now, this is where you have to be very mindful of the pieces that you're utilizing to try to transfer over skills. So for example, if I was to say what pieces would I want to utilize for my tier 6s to possibly transfer over abilities into tier 8s, I would recommend that you would want pieces that look like this, right? Now, the other thing is that this also then kind of raises the question, is it possible to roll gear with 3 gold stats? And for that, it is still kind of in the air. I haven't personally seen it, but now considering that it seems like you are able to fluctuate that first stat line, it might be possible. Now, I will have to wait till my reset next week for me to be able to open more chests to be able to test this. Or really, in reality, I would just have to kill a ton of mid bosses in the Fractal Vice to see if I can get one to maybe drop. But that, of course, is its own grind. But more than likely, you're going to be looking at pieces that don't have gray stats. And the reason why that is, especially when we're talking about these values, is that the gray stat value, because it will transfer over and it is the highest value roll that is on the gear, it will cap at that said roll. And that is why you see this piece here where I have a support 1 on the piece, right? Because naturally a tier 8 couldn't roll a support 1. That is just way too low of a value. It would actually be like something minimum, whatever is blue, right? Like that's the minimum. It would never roll a gray stat, especially on a tier 8. So this is where you have to be very careful with using the par system, being more mindful of the fact that even like some of these other pieces, like you would never use it on something like that, right? But you then would still want to consider, there is a chance that if I use the par on a piece just to get this enhanced skill, I could also potentially get a support 1 or a defense 1+. And I mean, those are kind of nasty stats and not in a good way to get onto a tier 8 and then have 2 gold or 1 gold and a purple stat, for example, right? So that's something that you absolutely want to avoid. But this discovery now confirms 100% it is possible to actually transfer over the tier 6 stat for enhanced skills. It is just that it is a random chance of it rolling over. Now, again, the next discovery and what I'm really trying to figure out is it possible to actually get a gold, double gold on top of that? Because it also made me kind of think, well, maybe at most a piece can roll naturally 2 golds, but if the first stat is being influenced to be a set stat, then the last 2 are randomized, then maybe so, right? Now, again, this of course then coincides with the idea of the buff that we currently have up. So let's actually go back to that. And with the buff that we have currently, the buff is, wrong thing. Got to go to the event tab. The buff that we have currently right now for this week is specifically for crit rate. and for defense 4. So the thing is that it doesn't say anything specific to what line this is going to be catered to, but because I'm seeing that the par is guaranteed to be on the first substat, I'm assuming that these could potentially be any of the substats lower or below that, right? Now, the other thing is it says is that it displays the content of the target substats at the highest rarity. So this is, of course, still implying that it will roll anywhere from a blue variation to a gold variation of this set stat, all the way up to a plus, right? Now, this is something that's also worth considering when you're going through the fractal vice, is that there will be the flux of whatever stat roll that you're aiming for on the par. And then there will be the stat rolls that you could potentially be getting from the favored, right? So why? Okay, ultimately, to tie this all together, why would you then be going for an enhanced skill versus, say, attack percent? Well, there's a couple of different things that you have to consider. And there's two values and two constructs I want you to think about when we're talking about what is a flat stat versus what is a multiplier. So the easiest way of explaining this, and let's actually go back to the characters here, is that your flat stat here is your attack, okay? So let's go to status detail. So attack is your flat stat. This stat basically is what we utilize to gauge or to determine what values are going to be able to multiply towards that or be multiplied off of that, right? So when we're talking about your primary attack damage multiplier, your secondary attack damage multiplier, counter attack damage multiplier, strategy skill damage multiplier. Damn, that kind of sounds like a song. But when we go through all these multipliers, these are going to be, or whatever values these are going to have, for example, are going to always be multiplied against that attack unless something else gimmick-wise says otherwise, right? Now, with that being the case, when you aim for things like attack percent, it is directly going to be added to your flat or base value, right? So if you have a attack percent giving you, say, 20% attack, that 20% will be added to this. What does an enhanced skill do differently? Well, an enhanced skill actually will, for example, if let's say we wanted to increase the percentage, right, on my radiant slay, or even if we wanted to increase my ultimate, let's just say the ultimate skill, where we actually get more explosion action damage, right? Let's actually do something real quick. So that was at 320 damage, right? If I was to say have a extra skill to be able to throw into skilling up the skill, right? So let's actually add that one. I don't know if that takes that to 4. Yes, it does, right? So now at level 4, I go from 320 to an additional 40% more action damage, which that's a extra 40% multiplier that I'm actually gaining for this specific skill. So in all actuality, when you're starting to actually look at the higher roles or levels, I should say, of specific skills, you're going to be able to focus on at least one piece of gear, I would say, at really honestly most that you would really want, and maybe even more depending on the unit, where we can actually amplify and scale that damage. So if I know that this unit bread and butter is the ultimate, then I would want skill ups to go into that ultimate versus just raw flat attack value, because there's a lot of different ways that you can get those values, but it's much harder to be able to get a, say, 40% increase on a skill versus, like, say, for example, the 20% flat value attack, right? And this is just something to kind of get you to like kind of determining or trying to decide on what stat value means more to you. But this is ultimately what I would say would make a big factor into why you would do something. Like, for example, right, this was at, I think, 2,600, but being able to add an extra 200% to the chain damage, that's actually kind of a lot, right? So this is something that I feel like kind of coincides with why we would want these roles for, I would say, higher pieces, considering that now people have values for ranks, and these are things that they're fluxing for things such as like the fighting instincts, which is directly increasing your skill ups, right? Or your levels on your skills, sorry. And so with that, again, it's just opening up a whole new world for you guys. Again, this is just me sharing a discovery with you, and just to maybe better help you with kind of getting the God roll or better optimize gear for your character, I feel like this is going to make a huge difference, because if people actually had or understood that this was a value that they could roll, they might even be approaching or had been approaching gear differently. I will say I do apologize that I didn't figure this out sooner. Unfortunately, a lot of this game is honestly just being discovered as we go through it. And I feel like this is something that definitely makes a huge difference in the process. So I am glad. And again, shout out to the fam, Giselle, for actually asking this question, because if you didn't ask this question, I don't think I actually would have went and tested this and found out all those important pivotal pieces of information that actually makes a huge difference in everything that now I am now looking at gear completely different. Like, I've even been doing this wrong. So I hope that this video was able to give you a little bit more perspective, maybe even helping you with the next weeks to come with aiming for and getting some better pieces. The nice thing is that in this game, pieces of gear don't require leveling. So it is kind of no harm, no foul, but it is definitely better to know now than to not know at all. So hopefully we can get some better information as we go. And we'll be able to see with chapter 3 if we're going to actually be seeing a implementation of newer or higher tier gear. I don't think so, but who knows? It might be a possibility. But that's going to be basically that with this one, guys. This is going to be the last video for the week. Again, I appreciate you guys for tuning in today, man. I'm going to be cooking up some more guides. I'm getting a ton of different things prepared. So yeah, I'm working really hard to try to give you guys the best content I possibly can. And I appreciate all of you guys that have been supporting the channel. But all of you guys, stay blessed, man. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.